Rejean Pepin was accused of 4 counts of robbery. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison for these crimes, which he did not commit. Rejean would spend 5 months in prison before the truth came out and he was released.
My whole childhood was normal. I worked for my father, and at 18 years old, I left the family home to live my life. I was planning to have children, to lead a normal family life, and perhaps to own a little house. I wasn't dreaming of owning a huge castle or anything like that, but I just wanted to have a normal, honest life while working to earn what I deserved.
Mr. Pepin, he was a somewhat isolated person. He was leading a very quiet life. He worked in a superstore, was quite discreet. He minded his own business. He was an average Joe. He was an anonymous man.
I met Claire in a totally unexpected way. On a Saturday afternoon, I went to get myself a lunch at the local snack bar. They serve hot dogs, fries, burgers, and stuff like that. And Claire was there, sitting at the counter. And we took a long look at each other. I'm a little shy by nature, but I dared ask her her name and telephone number. The same night, or the following day, I believe, I called her to tell her that I had made a terrific spaghetti sauce and would like to share it with her. So she invited me to her place, and we took 1, 2, I think maybe 3 bottles of wine. Then, taking my car was out of question, so I stayed at her place. But it was an evening during which nothing out of the ordinary happened. On the following day, we had breakfast, and 3 weeks later, we were living together. It was love at first sight. We really fell in love with each other. It was the best time of my life. But after 1 year of living together, that's where the drama started. The nightmare began. We had been shopping on a Thursday night. We got home around 8 o'clock, 8:30. We emptied the bags, put the food away. Then suddenly there's a knock on the door. A policeman introduces himself as an investigator from the Longueuil police. He was speaking loudly, and he stayed in the entrance. I told him to come in. There he gave me a description and told me, "We're investigating robberies that happened in Longueuil." I said, "Well, no problem. I will collaborate. Ask me questions." He said, "Tonight we just wanted to make sure you were staying here, but you will be invited to come to the police station." "No problem," I said. "I don't have anything to hide. I want to resolve this matter as quickly as possible." I believe he was surprised by my welcoming attitude and that I was not nervous, although I was taken aback to see a policeman knocking at my door. Yes, but I was not nervous because I had done nothing wrong.
2 weeks after the initial visit by the police, Rejean got called to report to the local police station. At the time, Rejean thought that this was a formality and a simple misunderstanding. However, because of a recent accusation of fraud, which had been completely cleared up, the Longueuil police had a photo of Rejean on file. Rejean's photo was selected by one of the victims as a potential suspect in the robberies.
At the end of my workday, I showed up at the police station. The policeman is not even there. I said, "For 2 weeks, I've been told that I'm being investigated, and now they're telling me the policeman I want to speak to is not there." So, he's not there. I went back home, disappointed of not being able to resolve the issue. 1, 2, 3 days later, they call me again, and now they tell me to report myself. I show up, and he's there.
The Longueuil police investigation centered around the testimony of one of the victims. Unbeknownst to Rejean, the investigating police officer had brought the young woman to the store where she worked to confirm that Rejean was the one she believed had committed the robberies.
I may have seen them, even talked to them, I don't know. She asserted that I was the same person, and to him, there was no doubt left. The way he behaved with me, his attitude was like, "You're guilty. you're the robber, and what were you doing on that date and this other date? 6 months later, what I was doing on June 13 at 7 o'clock. I said, what kind of answer do you want?
We can ask anybody, what did you do that day, 8, 9 months ago? Probably won't remember. Well, if that person has a diary, it could help. If that person is like the majority of people, does not have a diary, it'll be much more difficult.
I told myself, wait a minute, I'm not an idiot. I work, I have a girlfriend, I don't have any problems. Why would I commit robberies and dry cleaners? I have no alcohol or drug problem. Nothing to gain by stealing $100. And I became very aggressive. I know, I have a hot temper, and then dirty words came out. I found him so incompetent and stupid, and I thought he had no manners, was heavy-handed. I understand that he has to investigate and that he's trying to back me in a corner, but he should have understood that by accusing me of things I didn't do, I would react by standing up to him and to also be aggressive. And I decided I wasn't going to be bullied. I chose to call a lawyer because for me, this was going too far. And he had not read me my rights. He even told me, if you call a lawyer, you're proving me that you're the thief. I disregarded what he said and I called a lawyer. The lawyer told me, do not answer any question, and as long as they don't have a formal accusation, you do not have to go in a lineup, and you don't have to answer any question and don't sign anything. This is the advice the lawyer gave me at the time. But I didn't like the answer because I really wanted to collaborate with them at the time. Before the lineup, they put me in a cell and they left with Claire because Claire was with me. And they went to search our apartment to see if they could find any evidence, clothing, or actually anything to link me with the robberies. Supposedly the robber was wearing a hooded sweatshirt, a hoodie, but it was not the right color. Mine was gray, and the one they were looking for was blue. But they still took the sweatshirt, and that's all about they took. Perhaps a pair of glasses, yeah. Not prescription glasses. I wasn't wearing them at the time. They took like sunglasses. They were the only glasses I wore. So I was alone in the cell, and let's say it was cold, unpleasant. I had goosebumps all over my body, and I was really appalled by what was happening to me. And I was wondering what was going to happen. And I thought about Claire a lot at the time. But I wasn't worried. I knew that Claire would collaborate, and she knew I had done nothing wrong.
After the police officer returned from searching Rejean and Claire's apartment, Rejean was placed in a lineup with 4 other men to enable the victim of the holdups to identify the perpetrator of the crimes.
We are 5 people. I'm placed second, between 2 policemen, and the other 2 are 2 young men, slightly younger than the other 3. And they clearly said they were looking for a man in his 40s.
Miscarriages of justice are caused, in 80% of cases, by an identification problem. And Mr. Pepin's case is a good example. A person, in all good faith, has recognized Mr. Pepin as being the robber while he was not the thief. Despite the fact that we had elements that could question that identification, other victims were saying, no, it's not him. Some other victims were saying, he looks like him, but it's not really him. There was essentially only one person who was positive.
Even though not all the victims identified Rejean as the one who committed the holdups, the investigating police officer felt that the testimony from the ones that had identified him would be enough to build the investigation around Rejean having committed 4 out of the 5 holdups.
I had teary eyes. I was in no shape to read, and they wanted me to sign a statement. I said, no, I'm not signing any statement. So he said, okay, you're going home, but I can pick you up anytime, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, the following morning, I got on the phone to get a lawyer's advice. because of what I had experienced the previous day, which was not pleasant at all, not interesting. And then it dawned on me that I could be accused of crimes which I had not perpetrated. So I said to myself that I would call the chief of the Longueuil police and explain him that this whole story did not make any sense, and I wanted to tell him that I would not let some completely incompetent, arrogant officer harass me like this. I wanted the chief of police to get into my case, see the investigation against me. Basically, I had no objection to being a suspect, but to be accused, to be finger-pointed, and that cop, it seems, wanted me so much to be the culprit. And I was afraid, I was scared, and I thought this was no way to behave for a policeman.
Rejean's complaints to the police chief would fall on deaf ears. Rejean waited in limbo for over a year and a half, tormented by the thought of what the Longueuil police force would do next. He knew he would one day have to deal with the repercussions of these allegations. Meanwhile, Rejean worked on securing his alibi for any future trial.
I'm the one who called the police station and told them, could you please repeat me the exact robbery dates and times? Because I will get all the punch card information from my job, and I will demonstrate that I was working at the time the robberies were committed. And on 4 instances, I had the punch card indicating that I had started 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours before, and that I had finished 2-3 hours after the infamous 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock at night when the robberies occurred. So I had an alibi, I was working, but it was always alleged, never proven, but nonetheless always alleged, that I could have left the store, commit the robbery, and return to work as if nothing had happened.
Rejean's work alibi did not impress the investigator to drop the case against him. The Longueuil police was determined to pin these crimes on Rejean, regardless of the fact that he was working at the time the crimes were committed.
With the absence of corroboration on the alibi defense, the Crown has decided, according to it, that there was enough evidence to accuse him.
On December 2nd, I'm informed by certified letter that I'm officially indicted of 4 robberies. So I start shopping for a lawyer. I find one. I tell him I've done nothing, I'm accused, and then we agree on a price for his fees. And he tells me, if you pay and don't require an invoice or any receipt, I'm going to make you a good deal, and everything's going to be fine for you. I accept. And we go to trial. I'm going to trial with that guy, and I see he takes my case at heart, but never quite enough as far as I'm concerned. I'm the one who's accused, and I'm the one that's risking. And I see this lawyer one day cannot show up in court, so it gets postponed. Another day, it's the judge who's not present. When the trial is supposed to start at 9 o'clock, sometimes it started at 10. He didn't look fit. He had not arrived, and sometimes he looked very tired. I was actually worried about his health. And I was looking at him and thinking, he's the one that's going to judge. He's going to rule and decide on my future. Whether he's going to tell me, you're going to jail, or I'm setting you free. I was scared. I was really scared.
The fundamental evidence against him was the identification. And Mr. Pepin was saying, yes, but I have an alibi. Yes, I worked. And it was admitted that he had worked on that day. There was no ambiguity. But the type of work he was doing made that, according to his employer, and it had been noticed by the policeman, that he could step out from his work without anybody noticing.
Come on, how can I leave my work, commit robberies, and return back to work as if nothing happened? Come on, nobody's gonna believe this, a judge won't believe this. Who's gonna say this guy has enough guts to do this? This is ridiculous. I'm working legally 2 jobs, and my girlfriend works for the provincial government. So the question is, why should I commit robberies on Thursday night at 7 or 8 o'clock for a measly $100 in dry cleaning stores?
The alibi defense is always a risky one. It's always a difficult defense in situations where there's no conclusive external evidence, a hospitalization, for example. An alibi defense is always very difficult. Actually, in a criminal trial, the judge is in a situation where he has to believe someone, a victim, because in Mr. Pepin's case, there had truly been a robbery. There had really been a crime.
One of the young girl, the witness, told the judge that the person who had robbed her had curly hair and dark black hair. I have dark brown wavy hair, but I've never had a perm in my hair, and I've never had curls in my hair either.
The judges had to evaluate a person, a cashier, who came to testify saying it is that man. Everything was decided there. Everything was decided based on the witness's credibility.
I was very, very upset, and my face was getting red. The judge looked at me and says, "If you're unable to contain yourself, I will have you removed from this courtroom." And finally, the judge's verdict: guilty. I was handcuffed, ankle cuffed. I walked in front of the room, in front of my family. On the other side of the door, I said, "Damn, this is not possible." Then I was hit, tackled down, beaten, kicked all over my body, and thrown in a cell. I had just realized where I was and what I had just gotten into. And this was the beginning of my life in the prison system.
Rejean Pepin was found guilty of 4 counts of robbery in Longueuil and sent to prison for these crimes which he did not commit.
I got in my cell, crawling on my knees. I was crying. I was covered in my own blood. And my lawyer came to me and said, "Rejean, I swear to God what I'm going to tell you is true. Rejean, if you behave well, you'll get out very quickly. If you behave well, you'll be out at the 6th of your sentence." I said to myself, I have no business being here. Not even 5 minutes in a cell.
Imagine just for 30 seconds that an innocent person who's been claiming his innocence for a long time finds himself in that situation.
Approximately a month later, I'm transferred to the Longueuil Court of Justice. And my good lawyer is not even present. He was supposed to tell the judge, "Look, it's the first offense. There is no danger of reoffending." So he was coming to plead for me to have a minimum sentence. That's his job. But my lawyer is not there. The judge looks at me and says, "Are you ready to receive your sentence?" I got up, very politely, and I said, "Well, with all due respect, Your Honor, I would like my lawyer to be here." And Normand Boudreau shows up some half an hour or an hour later, gives a whole speech, but the judge has sentenced me to 3 years in jail with no remission and no parole for allegedly committing 4 $100 robberies.
After Rejean was sentenced to 3 years in prison, he chose to serve out his time in Cowansville, which was the least rough prison to survive a sentence.
I did not mix with the prison crowd. I was minding my own business. I was saying hi to the ones who said hi and totally ignored the ones ignoring me. And I prayed at night. I was praying for the real robber to come clean and to admit his crimes. But the real robber could not give himself up because he did not even know someone else had been accused for his crimes.
Without his wife Claire's constant love and support while he was incarcerated, Rejean would have had trouble handling his incarceration.
Claire has always been very present. In Partenay, she was coming every night. In Cowansville, she came every week. Claire never let me down. Never, never. And it's Claire who gave me the idea to actually contact the police commission. And I thought, policemen investigating other policemen, let's say I had little faith. But Claire said, at the point you're at, Rejean, you have nothing to lose. At least you should give it a try. So I said, yes, it's true, you're right. I called them, and I reached the secretary of the Quebec Police Commission. And I talked for almost half an hour. I was crying like a baby. I told him my story. And suddenly the secretary said, Mr. Pepin, I have to stop you. Put all of this in writing, and I promise we will take this seriously and appropriately. So I returned to my cell, and I think that for 2 or 3 days, I only wrote. I was not even sleeping. I wrote the story that happened to me, and I tried to be as precise as I could, and then finally put it in the mail as quickly as possible, and 1 or 2 weeks later they called me and told me that an investigator would come and see me in Cowansville. The police commission will do its investigation, so I get to meet this guy, and he tells me, listen, never lie to me because I'll make sure you serve twice of your time and you'll have a hard time. I said, no problem. I'm willing to take a lie detector. And if I tell one lie, just put me back in jail. No problem. So he took my whole statement and left. 2 weeks later, I received a letter informing me that I would have a public hearing at the Montreal Court of Justice, which should shed some light on the investigation. I was, I don't know if I can say this on TV, but I almost had an orgasm. I was so happy. I said to myself, finally, some policemen did their job, they checked, and in my head, my nightmare was coming to an end. I was starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel. I was starting to be nice with everybody around me. I was listening to the music in my Walkman. I was giving away my personal belongings. I was saying, I'm leaving. And I felt I was coming out of jail, although it wasn't official. But just knowing there would be a public investigation, I thought, they cannot be wrong twice. It's impossible.
Rejean had no idea that new evidence would surface the day of his public inquiry. Evidence from a most unlikely source.
I think the robberies started back in 1985. The robber committed 3 or 4, and the same robber who committed these robberies attempted to rob a bank. That is where he got caught. So, at the time they started investigating on me, the Longueuil police already had the real robber in custody, but they didn't make the link between the multiple dry cleaner robberies and the bank robbery. When I went to the public inquiry, and all the media and TV stations were there, CBC, TVA, CTV, and then a citizen, Rejean Pepin, says he's innocent of committing 4 robberies in Longueuil on such and such date. Alain Vézina is there in his cell, listening to the news report, saying to himself, God, I presume I committed these robberies. And this is the first time that he was aware that someone else was indicted for his crimes.
The true robber could have been incarcerated somewhere else. There's not only one prison in Quebec for that type of sentence. He could very well never have heard about Mr. Pepin, never meet him, even in the same prison. They could have been together without being in the same section. To be able to talk about it and understand that his cell neighbor was an innocent man because it was him.
He comes to me, and I say, what? He says, I'm the one who committed the robberies. I looked at him and said, what? He says, I'm the one who committed the robberies. I said, are you kidding me? He said, no, I committed the robberies. And he told me, now I'm going to call my lawyer. And if I don't get a bigger sentence, if I don't get to do more time, I will sign an affidavit stating that I admit being the perpetrator of the robberies. I told him, listen, want it or not, I'm going to call the police commission. And the following morning, I called the police commission's investigator, Mr. Jean-Louis Fourcadeau, and I told him, Mr. Fourcadeau, the guy who committed the robberies is in Cowansville with me.
With the new evidence proving his innocence, Rejean went back to court with the hope of getting out of prison as quickly as possible.
The judge could not get over the things that had happened. He said, it's over, I've heard enough. He did not have the power to acquit me, but he had the power to reverse the decision. The time for the papers to be ready, 3 or 4 days later, I was officially coming out of prison.
After 5 months of wrongful incarceration, a surprise admission from the actual robber, who happened to be in the same prison as Rejean, sets him free.
It was euphoria at first, as much for her as for me. But still, the euphoria, let's say, it passed. Because still, I was officially, by the system, guilty of committing robberies.
It would take 1 year after his liberation from prison for Rejean to be acquitted of the crimes he did not commit. Rejean had trouble reintegrating into society. He searched for a new job, wanting to start his life again from scratch.
Even though my 2 ex-employers took me back, I managed to lead a normal life. I'm the one who decided to change job, because I was experiencing some persecution. But applying for a job when one is accused of 4 robberies, I hadn't thought of that, and it's not obvious. I said, now I'm going to do something. So I called the mayor of my city because I was living in Ville d'Anjou hoping to get a job. Mr. Corbeil met me in his office. He had read the newspapers, he had heard my story through the media, and 3 weeks later, I started working for the city. He has really helped me. Socially, he gave me back the drive to be a citizen like anybody else, to work and to earn a living again.
Rejean could not let go of the injustice that had put him behind bars for crimes that he had never committed.
Mr. Pepin needed to take that civil action to really obtain recognition of the miscarriage of justice. but also to be compensated. His life had been destroyed. He had to have means to start over. He'd lost everything. So he minimally needed means. But that quest, also for recognition of a mistake, was to show everybody that he had really been a victim of miscarriage of justice.
I was acquitted. I went to jail for no reason, and I cannot believe that the system will not compensate me for what I went through. I shopped for a lawyer to undertake a civil action against the city of Longueuil, the director of the Longueuil police, and the 2 policemen who investigated my case.
Rejean found himself an established lawyer sympathetic to his cause of taking on the Longueuil police and seeking $1 million in compensation. After meeting with him several times over 6 years, the lawyer told him that his son was going to replace him for the civil court proceedings and that he was in good hands.
In my mind, I thought the father has experience, the son wants to prove himself, he's starting as a lawyer. I thought it may be a bad thing, but it may also be a good thing.
At the civil trial, after finding the actual robber, the judge should not wonder. He is innocent. So, how much does it cost? He has to ask, what were the errors that were made?
The Brotherhood of the Longueuil or Montreal Police, I can't remember if it's the same union. Anyway, they had a very good lawyer, and I admit it, an excellent lawyer. He wanted to demonstrate the policeman had not made an error. I could still be the criminal, so I was not entitled to compensation. The junior lawyer, in my view, has been whitewashed. And the other lawyer, the minute my lawyer said something, would say, "Objection, Your Honor, objection to this and that." And the judge would say, "Sustained." In other words, I was under the impression that they could say anything and everything, and it went like a hot knife through butter. The judge actually had a choice. And I was told this by my lawyer. He said he could take the report from the police commission and apply it to your case, or he could brush it aside and rule what he hears. In other words, we were going through a second trial because the police commission and everything they had done to try to help me didn't seem to matter anymore. And I had the impression of undergoing a second criminal trial, squarely.
When the witness testified in good faith and said, "This man is the culprit," that really impressed everyone. So the police commission lawyer tried to prove that both the Crown prosecutor and judge had made some kind of fault. But, in fact, there was no fault in gauging their responsibility. They simply believed a person who had identified an accused. And they evaluated the alibi. Although the alibi didn't seem to hold water, it was not the point. The judge said, "What is the fault?" Because in civil court, faults must be found. What error did the Crown make? They couldn't find any.
And after 18 days of hearing, the judge finally said, "Within 60 days, I will render a decision." And he even specified, and I think that's where my lawyer got a bit scared, if the decision is not in your favor, you'll just have to appeal. I think he took 59 days and a half to render his decision. The 60th day, I called my lawyer. I was at work, and I remember as if it was yesterday. And my lawyer said, "Mr. Pepin, you have lost everything. Lost everything. They do not find you right on anything." I was at work. I was at the cafeteria. I hanged up the telephone. I did not even talk to my boss. Got in my car, and I went directly to see Claire at her work. And I gave her the news. that we had just lost everything. We did not have a penny, and we had court fees that amounted to $18,000.
It's as if he were told, "You're still guilty."
It would have cost Rejean $20,000 to appeal the civil court decision. Not only was Rejean in debt, but his personal life was beginning to fall apart, and he could not afford to appeal the decision of the civil case.
The anger I had inside was uncontrollable, and Claire was paying the price for that. And that's when the tension became so high that I left with a mattress on top of my car, with a green bag, with jeans, shirts, and I left everything in the house. I took off to continue alone.
Rejean found himself in a hopeless situation personally and financially.
I was reflecting on my situation. Never I'll give one penny for that. Even if I won $10 million at Lotto 649, I would not pay an $18,000 bill for court fees. But a few weeks later, I got a surprise when I received my pay stub. Less half. So, I came to understand my salary was being seized by the city of Longueuil. So that night, I gathered all the invoices, every debt I had, and it may have amounted to $35,000. And eventually I filed for personal bankruptcy because of that.
Rejean was forced into a personal bankruptcy of $35,000 because of his loss in civil court. He was at the end of his rope, the lowest point in his life. He had no idea that he would suffer through yet another devastating personal blow.
Before the settlement happened, I was in Quebec City. My sister calls me on my cell phone to tell me that we should have dinner together. And I said, well, why? What? And she said, you'll see, we'll talk tonight. And when I arrived in Montreal, she told me that Claire had committed suicide. So, I have the kind of impression my ordeal took too much space. We all react in our own way. Some may have reacted better, maybe worse than me. And Claire reacted by getting high on medication to the point of deciding to end her life.
Elle a décidé de mettre fin à ses jours.
It was a lot to handle at the same time. It's not something that happens all at once, one step. Then you live this for a couple of years, and then suddenly there's another step you have to live, and then a third step, and so on. So between 1985 and 2001, I lived through 3 catastrophes, one after the other. It's a little too much.
After coming out of a 6-month depression, Rejean found the inner strength to pick himself up and go back to work. He then began the uphill battle for compensation.
Begging for your due is a very unpleasant thing to do. It's even humiliating. Sometimes I said I wasn't very proud. But I had to do it because I knew I could not live without clearing that error. I would not have been able. I felt like a speck of dust in front of a big mountain as if it was telling me you're just a tiny bit of dust.
He didn't have a lawyer. He's been a bit lucky. He went to see his local member of parliament and explained the situation. That member of parliament was a trained lawyer. He got a good understanding of the situation.
Mr. Bélanger, I liked him. He's a person who seemed open-minded. He took the time to listen to me, and I poured my heart out. I told him my whole story. Quite briefly, but I had a lot of emotions in my voice. And then he said, look, I can't promise anything, but I have your case in hand, and I will go further with this. A few days later, I had a second meeting with him. Again, he said, you know, there would be a law stating that when a province recognizes one of its citizens a victim of a miscarriage of justice, the federal government grants the same amount the province has chosen to grant.
That's when the famous compensation program for victims of miscarriage of justice was applied, to my knowledge, for the first time in Quebec, even if technically we could have thought he did not perfectly meet the criteria.
So they passed each other the buck for 2 years, and finally I got a call from a lawyer for the Quebec government to tell me that it was playing in my favor. And he used the Latin word in gratia, which means that I was graced. He said, we're not compelled to do it, we're not obliged to do it, but we would like to reach some kind of an agreement with you.
Rejean met with the Quebec government to evaluate the damage he had suffered as a result of his wrongful imprisonment in order to determine what he might receive.
I got a call 1, 2, 3 weeks later to tell me that the amount I was allocated was $94,000, and it was a take it or leave it offer. At least I had an amount. And I was told, look, you have this money. And in my head it was like, finally, I'm found innocent. But it never became public. It was never publicly acknowledged. The provincial government gave me the first $94,000 check. They gave it to me at 11:45, and the man told me, I have a meeting at 12. And he already had a paper on his desk. And while giving me the check, he gives me the paper saying, sign this. It's a paper saying that you'll never come back against the government. And no matter the amount, I would have signed the paper.
And the federal government sent a check of the same amount saying, it's nice of us, we don't have to.
Nobody said, look, we apologize for hurting you.
I think it's the last insult he received.
Rejean survived a 16-year struggle with the Quebec justice system. With $188,000 that he received for his wrongful conviction, Rejean was finally able to move on with his life.
Today, I think I've found the right person for me, a person with whom I want to share my future. In the total fluke in August, I met the one who lives all my moment with me, my sadness, my happiness. Nicole, she's an adorable person. She's calm, and I think I needed some tranquility, peace within. And with her, I feel a complete calmness. She trusts me. She knows my story from beginning to end. I hid nothing at the beginning, and she believed me. And she supports me 100%. I even told Nicole, I don't know if I will love someone again. I had no more room because Claire had taken a lot of space in my life. And Claire disappeared in a tragic way. And even today, I find it hard to accept. So, it's done. I can't change it. And she accepted it.
I believe that somewhere, somehow, there is always hope. I'm a believer. Maybe there is a small guardian angel somewhere who looks over us and who is able to guide us and give us the strength we need in difficult times. And Rejean had the strength to move forward. With the help of good people, I believe one is able to function well and carry on. But you have to believe. And I think that because Rejean believed, he was able to pull through his ordeal. It's been 20 years already.
I can't wait to get back to an entirely normal life, despite the fact that I believe I will die with the feeling of an injury that was not completely healed. But with time, we forget. We don't have a choice. Otherwise, we will destroy ourselves. And I tell myself that the justice has damaged me quite a lot, but I shouldn't damage myself because of that. So I try to keep a spirit as strong as possible.